From arrests in the Arctic to assaulting fans on stage, the turbulent history of The Clash is filled with hardship and conflict. Decades after the band's breakup, the surviving members are still recovering. When he wasn't making music about society's myriad problems, The Clash frontman and songwriter Joe Strummer conducted several romantic affairs and relationships. Additionally, much of Strummer's personal, offstage life was fraught with chaos, tension, and complexity. According to Chris Salavich's redemption song, The Ballad of Joe Strummer, Strummer started dating a Spanish woman named Paloma Romero in the mid-1970s. Her visa was about to expire in 1975, and, wishing to remain in the UK, she tried to arrange a marriage with Strummer. He was amenable to the idea, but he couldn't because he'd already gotten married earlier that year, and for a similar reason. Strummer had wed a South African emigre named Pamela Jill Moolman so she could obtain UK residency. In 1978, after The Clash had found some success, Strummer began dating Gabby Salter, who was 17 when she moved in with the guitarist. In January 1986, 10 days after Salter gave birth to the couple's second child, and weeks after Strummer learned that his mother's cancer diagnosis had grown near terminal, Gabby's brother, Nick Salter, died by suicide. Strummer and Gabby Salter would remain a couple for decades, but never marry. He carried on dalliances and extramarital affairs, including one with Lucinda Tate, whom Strummer would marry in 1995. As a writer of and mouthpiece for anti-establishment punk rock, Strummer frequently clashed with authority and broke the law.
Music had become very boring. That's really why punk came about.
In his biography on Strummer, Salovich recounted an altercation where Strummer was busking at London's Oxford Circus train depot in the early 1970s when he heard a loudspeaker announce that the police were en route to arrest him for illegally performing. Later that decade, according to The Independent, Strummer was apprehended for stealing a hotel's pillowcase and alongside drummer Topper Headon for spray painting The Clash on a different hotel's wall. In 1978, Strummer became so incensed with bouncers roughing up audience members during a show at Glasgow's Apollo Theatre that he pulled the band off stage. After the show, the guitarist was confronted by fans who wondered why he didn't intervene more aggressively. Mick Jones told the Daily Record, "Joe was so angry he smashed a bottle and was immediately jumped on by plainclothes policemen." 2 years later, Strummer would face charges for another concert incident. During a gig in Hamburg, Germany in 1980, multiple fans grabbed the mic to accuse The Clash of selling out, prompting an angry Strummer to hit one of them in the head with his guitar. That earned him an assault charge. In 1983, The Clash was still basking in the glow of its 1982 hit album, Combat Rock, which spawned two of their best-known and most successful singles, Should I Stay or Should I Go, and Rock the Casbah. Both songs prominently featured Clash guitarist and vocalist Mick Jones, who, in September 1983, would lose his position in the band. Overall, it was a rough period for the band. They'd recently fired drummer Topper Headon, and his replacement Terry Chimes, who The Clash credited as Tory Crimes on recordings, quit after a year. As Combat Rock turned The Clash into a mainstream success, Strummer and bassist Paul Simonon wanted to cash in with a huge tour. Jones didn't, however, as he was seemingly burned out and exhibiting selfish behavior. Strummer said in the documentary Westway to the World, "Mick was intolerable to work with. He wouldn't show up. When he did show up, it was like Elizabeth Taylor in a filthy mood." Strummer attempted to improve the work environment by getting rid of what he thought was the problem. Strummer said in the 2012 documentary The Rise and Fall of The Clash, "We had to change the team because the atmosphere was terrible. Jones was so unreliable that with the support of Simonon, Strummer had him fired." The Clash continued to perform for several years after the vocalist's departure, and in 1985, they released their final studio album, Cut the Crap. Despite these efforts, the group would never release music that achieved the same level of acclaim as the work they did with Jones. London-based guitarist Keith Levene was a founding member of two important British rock bands, one punk and the other post-punk. At the age of 18 in 1976, Levene got together with bassist Paul Simonon and guitarist Mick Jones to form the first incarnation of The Clash, recruiting Joe Strummer not long after. That first iteration of the band got a record deal, and their first album, 1977's self-titled release, The Clash, included What's My Name, a song co-written by Levene. By that point, Levene had actually left The Clash, as he wasn't thrilled about the hyper-political direction the band was slowly adopting. In 1978, the Sex Pistols, a band of British punks that strongly influenced The Clash, split up. The group's dissolution left frontman Johnny Rotten free to start the experimental, reggae-influenced dance rock project Public Image Limited. He immediately recruited Levene, who helped establish the group's unique sound, heard on hit UK records like First Issue and Metal Box. Levene left Public Image Limited in 1983, moved to Los Angeles, and worked with rap acts and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. On November 11, 2022, Levene died. According to his friend, Public Image Limited biographer Adam Hammond, Levene had received a liver cancer diagnosis 2 years earlier. The guitarist was 65 years old. Drummer Nicholas "Topper" Headon joined The Clash in 1977, just in time for their first album, but the relentless schedule led to a premature end to his marriage. That's also when he developed substance abuse issues. Headon told The Independent, "I went on the road and discovered booze. All I did was drink. Then Mick Jones turned me on to coke, and all I did was coke."
We're on the road too much.
By the early 1980s, Headon took to doing drugs during concerts, snorting cocaine between songs. After the Clash's roadies introduced him to heroin, the band forced Headon into a drug rehab program in 1982. He resumed his cocaine use during a European tour and earned a suspension from the band. But then Clash singer Joe Strummer let slip to a reporter that he'd actually fired Headon for his destructive drug use.
If you try and imagine a group and the drummer is falling apart, then no matter what you're putting on top, it's going to fall apart.
His dismissal became the inciting incident for even more drug use and a switch from cocaine to heroin. Headon told The Independent, "I just stuck needles in my arm, which I'd never done before." By the late 1980s, Headon's addiction had exhausted his funds from The Clash so completely that he took a job as a cab driver and then a busker, banging on bongos in the London Underground subway station. He told The Independent that busking was particularly humbling, as passers-by would regularly recognize him as a former member of The Clash. According to Kent Online, Headon attained lasting sobriety in 2004. He told The Independent it was his 13th attempt at getting clean. Even so, the drummer suffered from numerous other health problems related to his substance abuse and his chosen profession. After his time in The Clash, Headon moved back to his hometown of Dover, briefly quitting intravenous heroin, instead frequenting bars and consuming large amounts of alcohol, The Independent reports. During this time, his doctor diagnosed him with hepatitis C, a viral infection commonly found among IV drug users in the 1980s. The disease can lead to liver failure. Headon quit drinking so much and took up heroin again. Upon kicking drugs, he formed a Narcotics Anonymous chapter as well as a support group for people suffering from hepatitis C, and then became the spokesperson for the UK charity, the Hepatitis C Trust. In 2009, Headon entered another rehab facility, this one focused on physical rehab to alleviate constant back pain, which he developed over years spent as a drummer with poor posture. However, he didn't notice the pain until after he'd cleared drugs out of his system in 2004. Headon told the Daily Mail of his chronic back pain. "Almost all professional drummers end up with problems." Headon was treated for scoliosis, or curvature of the spine, with a rigorous 2-week, 7-hour-a-day treatment regimen. Paul Simonon played bass for The Clash, and in defiance of the group's many lineup changes, was the only musician to be around for the band's entire, decade-long career. Following the band's dissolution, Simonon played bass on records for Bob Dylan, Allen Ginsberg, and Havana 3 AM, before devoting a lot of his time, effort, and labor to environmental causes. His involvement with one high-profile and particularly assertive organization would lead to his arrest. In 2011, according to the Greenpeace blog, Simonon quietly and anonymously joined the crew of the Esperanza, a ship that's part of the fleet of environmental organization Greenpeace. The vessel was headed to the Arctic Circle to protest oil drilling in the region, and Simonon told the rest of the crew that he was just a guy named Paul, hired as an assistant cook. When the Esperanza arrived at its intended destination, Simonon and his fellow crew members illegally invaded an oil rig and climbed to the top of it. Along with the rest of the Esperanza crew, Simonon requested that the oil company that owned the oil rig disclose its oil spill response protocol in the event of such a disaster. Police from the nearest jurisdiction, Greenland, made their way out to the oil rig and arrested the protesters, including Simonon. He spent 2 weeks in jail. Before becoming Joe Strummer, John Mellor was brought up the son of middle-class British parents. By his mid-20s, he was one of the most vocal and politically outspoken musicians in punk, a genre that took off in popularity and influence during economic recession and the conservative tenure of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the late 1970s.
He had a clear and palpable intelligence that he lent to the entire attitude. It was an attitude far more than it was a movement.
After playing in a cover band called the 101ers, he formed The Clash and operated as co-frontman with Mick Jones until his firing in 1983. Shortly after Jones's departure, The Clash broke up. In 2002, The Clash were voted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Strummer wouldn't live to attend the ceremony or reunite with his old bandmates. His website broke the news that he died on December 22, 2002, at his home in Somerset, England. 3 days later, Somerset coroner Michael Rose released the results of a post-mortem examination, confirming that the cause of death was cardiac arrest suffered after Strummer returned home from walking his dog, collapsed, and couldn't be revived. Strummer was 50 years old. The Clash were only together for a relatively scant 10 years, during which time they produced 6 studio albums and released several singles that hit the UK Top 40. Additionally, both Train in Vain and Rock the Casbah made it to the US Top 40 as well.
When you're hot, you're hot. That's the industry dictum, isn't it?
For hardcore fans of The Clash and their signature brand of innovative punk rock, it's a tragedy that there isn't any more music, but there could have been. In the early 2000s, the tensions that led to the breakup of The Clash a decade and a half earlier had thawed to the point where the members of the most successful lineup were all in touch. Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Topper Headon, and Paul Simonon even discussed reuniting in some fashion. Simonon told Uncut, "Everybody seemed quite interested in the idea, but I wasn't. I'd rather me and Joe worked together again in another project, rather than go the easy route and reform something that was quite special and unique to that time." Despite Simonon's protests, The Clash did have a one-time-only reunion planned for their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, Strummer's untimely death after the announcement meant that a true and full reunion of The Clash would never come to pass. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration's 24/7 national helpline at 1-800-662-HELP.